Welcome everybody, this is Defeater of Souls, and as you know, I am going to be beating the original Dragon Quest Monsters game only using a slime. So here are the rules. On my party, the only thing I am allowed to have is a single slime, and it must be a standard slime, not just a member of the slime family. I am allowed to breed monsters, as long as the end result ultimately leads to me only having a slime on my party. This does lead to the exception in the first rule, where I can put a monster in my team only to breed my slime with something else and get a slime back. Then I have to train the level 1 slime by itself. I am allowed to use the likes of items, I am allowed to run away, I can do anything else, but those are the main restrictions on this playthrough. So, with that all specified, let's get started and see just how bad or how good it is to actually play through the game with only this single monster. So starting right off, the slime is the first person you get from the start of the game at the stables, so Slib will be our first slime. He will be the grandparents of our generation. So, if you don't know, the progression of Dragon Quest Monsters is cut up into completing two separate things. There are Traveler's Gates, and then there's the tournament bouts. In order to beat the game, you have to climb through the tournament rankings, and once you've beaten S rank, you're able to compete in the Starry Night tournament and beat the game once you complete that. However, in order to actually train your monsters, you have to go through these Traveler Gates, which are randomly generated dungeons of certain lengths depending on which gate. At the bottom of each gate is a boss, and upon defeating that boss, the gate is considered complete. However, it is important to note that there is only a handful of gates that are actually required to complete the game. The main ones being the Gate of Anger and the gate at the start of the game. There's also one other one at the end. After all that, there's also only two tournament fights that you're required to beat before you start the Starry Night tournament. You have to beat the tournament at D rank, and you have to beat the tournament at S rank. All the other ones in between are optional. So with that information in mind, I decided to start at the very first Traveler's Gate. This Traveler's Gate's a pretty short one, and at the end of it, it's a heal slime. You can see it's pretty simple. So right away we get to the heal slime fight, and he has a habit of, healing himself. Fortunately, since he is a heal slime and is a slime, upon defeating him I will be able to add him to my party, not to my party, but use him for breeding to get my slime to learn healing moves. These are essential for the rest of the match, as without these healing moves I would have lost a million times over. Now, of course, after this, we move on to the next Traveler's Gate, but before we do that, we're required to participate in the first tournament. So before I can continue down any more gates, I gotta try and win the first class in the arena. Now, the first guy uses an Anteater and some Drakkies, and he's not too bad, and I'm able to take him out rather quickly. The second guy uses a few other guys as well, and status conditions, which are going to prove to be a rather annoying factor in this challenge run, but I am able to defeat him. I got unlucky on the third run, and Slib ended up seeing his first game over in an arena. Now, of course, after that, on my second try, I was easily able to beat it, and we're able to move on to the next couple of Traveler's Gates. Now, most of these early Traveler Gates I do as well, because they're easier to do and they're worth good stuff. So the first one I get to is the end of the Villager Gate, the Gate of Villager. This has a dragon as the boss, and the dragon is incredibly fond of using fire magic. Now, something else I need to specify is that you are allowed to recruit monsters as long as you do not put them on your team, for reasons obviously stated by the challenge run itself. After defeating the dragon, we move on to the next gate, which is the Gate of Talisman. The Gate of Talisman is pretty simple as well. Upon beating it, you'll be able to move on to the next arena, and the Golem himself wasn't too bad either. After defeating the Golem, we move on to the next class, which is F class. The first guy uses a few spot slimes, which are nothing special. The second guy uses Bunnicorn and a few mud dolls, also nothing special. The third guy once again trips me up and defeats me, so it's on my next try that I'm actually able to defeat him. Of course, After this success, I am able to unlock breeding in general. Now that I've accessed breeding, I'll be able to start fusing my monsters. So we'll begin by breeding my good pal Slib to the next generation. And that's right, the one and only Slab. I will not show every single time I breed a new generation, but I will make sure I specify when I did off screen. So now that I have Slab, I do a little training before moving on to the next gate. Now the next gate is the Gate of Memories. At the end of the Gate of Memories, after a few runs going through it, is the Mad Cat. The Mad Cat's a little difficult, and due to his tendency to take away my actions, another thing that's going to be incredibly annoying throughout my playthrough. After defeating him and letting the cat get out of the bag, we move on to the next one. The next one, of course, being the Gate of Bewilder. The Gate of Bewilder has a face tree at the end of it, after you get through this little maze where all the walls keep moving. The face tree is not so bad, it's just the fact that I started the battle. No, the fact that I ended up getting Curse, and Curse is an incredibly annoying status condition to work with. After defeating him, we were able to move on, get some more breeding options and whatnot, before finally being able to continue on to the next rank in the arena. E-Class Arena has a few guys who are also a nuisance, but not nearly as bad as some of the previous arenas. The dragon that used by the second person ends up taking way too long to kill, but the third person's not too bad, and I'm able to easily finish him off for the first time in a while. After messing around a little bit, I decide to upgrade my slime to Slob. So we're now on to our third generation of slimes. Slob is about as good as Slab was, but he is able to take out the next guy. And the next guy is, of course, the Gates of Peace. After completing the Gates of Peace by defeating the Fang Slime, we now have access to the next guy we can use to immediately upgrade Slob into Slug. Slug helps us out in the Gate of Bravery against the Big Eye, who is really annoying due to their tendency to use magic. After a bit of training with my good pal Slug, we figure out a way to get past him, that being using a Mist Staff, which I am allowed to use, in order to prevent the Big Eye from casting magic in the first place. It slows down the battle quite a bit, but it does work. After completing all that, we do move on to the next rank in the arena. D rank is like any of the other ranks. I make it through the first two pretty easy and end up dying on the third one. Of course, second time's a charm, as after a little bit of training, I now have access to the next gate. Now I'm required to do the next progression gate, this being the Gate of Anger. So right away we head towards that and complete that with our good pal Slug still. Slug, of course, has some assistance from me using the items, and a few well-placed commands are able to get us through this fight almost unscathed. After getting ourselves a new pal, we move on to our next gate, which is the one accompanying the Gate of Anger, that being the Gate of Strength. This gate's not so bad. Of course, the Stone Man has a tendency to be incredibly annoying, wiping my entire gang out. Now, of course, at this time, I discovered that I really need somebody a little stronger, so I upgrade Slug to the next Generation 4 slime, that being Slack. Now, rather than go directly back to the Gate of Strength, we actually head towards a completely different one. This one is actually the gate inside of a well. This is considered the Well Gate. As you see on the bottom of the well, there's a professor who ends up needing a certain monster. Upon giving to him, I unlock this optional gate, where I'm able to take on this Gigantus and lose. Now, of course, second time I go ahead and try again, and using some very clever playing, I'm able to easily beat him. After that lovely diversion, I decide to go back to the Stone Man, and lo and behold, Slack is perfectly capable of beating the Stone Man. Now, of course, these next couple of Traveler Gates having been completed, I decide to try my luck with the next class in the arena, that of course being C-Class. C-Class isn't too bad until, once again, I get to the third rank. And once again, I get completely wiped out. Now, rather than immediately go back to any certain class, I decided to instead take another optional gate. This one is considered the farm gate, and it's done after accessible after completing the Gate of Anger. From here I have to fight a mime, and you'll see I'll make an incredibly essential mistake, that is underestimating the power of my own slime. Now of course, second time once again is a charm, and I'm able to defeat him. I do accidentally throw him on my party, but you can see that I make sure to immediately remove him first things first. There's also another optional well I have access to, and that is of course the arena gate. From playing a lot of rock, paper, scissors, and winning, I'm able to fight a digger. And these guys are incredibly annoying, but Slack is more than capable of carrying his own. Having successfully dealt with the Digster, as his real name is, I end up moving further, and I get incredibly closer to our final slime. That's right, the Digster is one of the last bosses our good pal Slack will ever see, but before that, we try our luck in Arena B. I mean C-Class. We try our luck at C-Class, and C-Class doesn't go well, as is usual. Just kidding, C-Class went great. We beat C-Class and moved straight to the Gate of Wisdom, where I struggled and used some incredibly clever strategies and take magic to steal the MP of a Sky Dragon in order to prevent him from killing my slime in one hit. After successfully doing that, we move right away to the Gate of Joy. And of course, the Gate of Joy has a boss at the end, like all gates do, but this one was a total pushover, and I was able to defeat the Funky Bird with almost no effort whatsoever. The Funky Bird is the last bird that my good pal Slack will ever see, as he gets upgraded one last time to the ultimate slime that I'll be using to finish this playthrough. That's right, I upgraded him to the originally named Glub. Now, having collected more than 13 mini-medals, I have access to another optional gate, and it's at the end of this one I meet the culmination of all of Glub's former selves, the King Slime. The King Slime is incredibly annoying due to his tendency to heal himself, and he heals himself often, and the HP healed is a lot. Now, of course, successfully beating the King Slime really wasn't that difficult in hindsight, but it was incredibly time-consuming. After all that, we decided to actually try B-Class, where we're able to make it a pretty good distance until once again we get wiped out in the third wave. Deciding to do a little more training, we go again, and this time we are actually able to defeat him using an interesting moveset we got from a few of the slimes bred. Now, of course, at this point, Glub is looking really good with his stats, and to the point where I can't even increase his intelligence anymore due to it capping at 255. However, Glub's maximum level is 58, which means there's still a whole lot of training I can do. Now, Class A was a bit of a pushover, and it was rather unfortunate, really, because Class A seemed to be hyped up quite a bit. Now, of course, I did beat Class S, but I just forgot to get footage of that, and I am incredibly sorry. It took me 3 tries to complete Class S with Glub, and at that point, he was already close to max level. Now, by the time he did reach max level, we had reached the final gate required to beat the game, the Gate of Reflection. The Gate of Reflection's interesting because at the end of it, you have 3 separate bosses which you gotta compete against, instead of the standard one. The first bosses are sent out, and they're just a couple of servants. They're really not as difficult as some of the other bosses. The second one is Terry, from Dragon Quest VI, and the future self of the protagonist. Now, of course, Terry's incredibly powerful, but when Glub has the power to take that power and throw it back with a much higher attack stat, it's really incredibly easy. Now, of course, our final pal is the leader of the whole ring trio, and that's Duran. Duran? That's right, Duran. And Duran was also a total pushover. He has multiple moves that target unique families, but since the only family I had was a slime, I was able to defeat Duran. After I sent his corpse floating down the Rio and had a nice little chat with my future self, we got ready for the final battle. Now, the Starry Night tournament is basically the equivalent of this game's Elite Four for Pokemon. You need to beat the 3 fights in a row. Now, of course, the first fight is from the representative of a different tree kingdom known as Big Trunk, and with my max level Glub, taking out his series of dragons and other monsters was a piece of cake. Right after that, we move on to the next one, the Master of Dead Tree. Dead Tree is about as easy as our good other pal, but it's really also not that hard to defeat that many dragons and a unicorn. Honestly, dragons seem to be a very common pick between the masters of these trees. It's a real shame I didn't have any on my part. The final battle of the game is up against my sister, and this is of course spoilers, but come on, you knew that if I was playing the game, I was going to be beating the game. So we're up against my sister, and my sister has a series of pretty powerful monsters. Of course, all as powerful as they are, due to the broken mechanics of breeding within the game, I am easily able to defeat her entire party. Now, of course, my final slime, which was Glub, was level 58. His stats were incredibly high, each one breaking 450. A few other extra details here while these ending scenes play is that he learned all his moves from monsters he was bred with. I did actually do a little thing in the back that I didn't mention at all, and that's the fact that all the monsters that I randomly bred end up catching without meaning to. I ended up breeding in the background in the stables. They were kept in the stables where they gained a little bit of HP before they'd be XP before they were bred again. By doing this and combining it with his slime before breeding it with our good pal Glub, it would have allowed Glub to reach a much higher level upon his parents' breeding. Now, of course, is this cheating? Absolutely not. I, after all, only used a single slime on my party for my playthrough of Dragon Quest Monsters. Now, was this hard? There were definitely challenges, like status conditions in particular were incredibly annoying. Paralysis, if you have a fully paralyzed party, it's counted as a game over, which meant I'd be incredibly prone to skipping past any enemies that would happen to paralyze. But it is entirely possible. In fact, due to the way the game's mechanics are built, it's not only possible, but entirely likely that you could take any monster in the game, not just a slime, and do something similar to what I did here, and completely beat the game just using the slime on your party. Now, of course, you might be thinking, well, I thought you were only going to use the first slime acquired in the game, and there's a problem with that, and that's the problem that Slib is incredibly limited. He only has the 3 moves that slimes learn naturally, and he has a much lower level limit than all the other slimes that I ended up breeding. He also would not have access to any way to buff his stats, and ultimately, beating the game with just Slib would be basically impossible, and you would have an incredibly tough time just getting past the C rank in the arena, if it's even possible at all. Now, of course, this challenge was indeed a lot of fun, and I'd be likely to do similar things like this again, if you're interested. Now, of course, the only way I can tell whether or not you'd be interested in stupid challenges like this is if you like and subscribe to my channel. Now, of course, that might be too much to ask, and that's fine. Maybe you could just leave a comment, asking any questions about my run that you might have, or maybe suggesting ideas for runs I could do in some of the other games. The next game that I might do a challenge run for would be Dragon Warrior Monsters 2 Kobe's Adventure, but before then, we're going to release some of my usual videos. So with that all being said, this has been Defeater of Souls.